All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're doing a deep dive into UnitedHealth Group's Q3 2024 earnings call.
We're basically going behind the curtain, right? Trying to understand what makes this healthcare giant tick. What are they seeing? What are they saying about the future? And most importantly, what does it all mean for us?
Makes sense because let's be real. When a company the size of UNH makes a move, it's kind of like a ripple effect, The whole healthcare system feels it.
Oh, absolutely. And this quarter, it's a wild mix. Record profits, yeah, but also some pretty big challenges they're trying to navigate.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What were the big takeaways from the earnings call?
At first glance, everything's sunshine and rainbows. UNH reported revenue growth over 9%. We're talking a massive $101 billion.
Wow, okay, so they're making bank?
Right.
But you said there were challenges too.
Here's the thing, and this is what I find interesting even with those incredible numbers. The CEO kept using the word challenges, like they're trying to prepare everyone.
Almost like they're trying to downplay the wins a little.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that actually tells us a lot about UNH's long-term strategy. They're not getting complacent, they're looking ahead, and they're seeing some potential bumps in the road.
So they're growing, but they're also being cautious.
That's a great way to put it. They're investing in reaching more people, expanding their different businesses, commercial insurance, their Optum Health services, even pharmacy benefit management. But they're also very aware of the challenges they're facing in the current healthcare environment.
And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, right? We're not just looking at the numbers themselves, but trying to understand what they tell us about the future of healthcare.
Exactly. And what I'm getting from this earnings call is that UNH knows the healthcare landscape is changing, and they're trying to adapt, which could have huge implications for everyone.
Okay, so big picture, record revenue, but UNH leadership is definitely sending some cautious signals about the future. Let's dig into what's driving their outlook. What's looking good, and what are those potential challenges?
Sure thing. Let's kick things off with some good news. Their commercial insurance business, it's on fire. They added a whopping 2.4 million new customers just last quarter.
Wow, seriously, that's like adding a small city to their rolls every few months. What's fueling that kind of growth?
Well, it tells us a few things. First off, they're obviously doing something right, attracting businesses and individuals who are choosing UNH for their healthcare. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. This growth is happening against a backdrop of, rising healthcare costs, economic uncertainty, the whole shebang.
So they're managing to thread the needle, attracting customers in a really tough environment.
Impressive. Okay, what about their Optum segment? You mentioned it earlier. Sounds like it's a pretty key part of their strategy.
Optum is fascinating. It shows how UNH is becoming more than just your typical insurance company. They're using Optum to create a whole healthcare ecosystem, everything from basic primary care to surgery, behavioral health, even home care. So they're getting more directly involved in actually providing healthcare services, not just financing them through insurance. Is that what value-based care is all about?
Bingo. Optum is basically UNH's value-based care, baby. It's all about keeping people healthy and out of the hospital, which ultimately helps keep costs down. And they're using tech and data to personalize care, make it more efficient, the whole 9 yards.
It's like they're trying to get ahead of the healthcare cost curve by investing in prevention and better management of care. Makes sense. But let's get into those challenges the CEO was hinting at. What are the headwinds they're facing?
Well, for starters, those Medicare Advantage rate cuts we talked about, those are a major factor, putting pressure on UNH's bottom line, especially as we head into 2025.
Because Medicare Advantage is such a big chunk of their business.
Yeah, got it. And it's not just them. A lot of insurers are grappling with these cuts. But here's the interesting part. UNH seems pretty confident that they can handle these cuts without, sacrificing the quality or attractiveness of their Medicare Advantage plans. We'll see how that plays out.
It's a gamble for sure. Trying to balance affordability for members with their own financial stability.
High stakes.
And then there's the whole ripple effect of Medicaid redeterminations.
Ah, yes. The redeterminations, always a mouthful. Remind me what those are about again.
Basically, during the pandemic, states kept people enrolled in Medicaid even if they didn't technically qualify anymore. Now states are going back and reevaluating eligibility, and millions of people are losing that coverage.
Right. And that means...
Well, I was thinking fewer people on Medicaid would mean lower costs for UNH, right?
Not so fast.
Yeah.
It's actually more complicated than that. You see the people who still qualify for Medicaid after all these redeterminations, they tend to have more health problems, more complex needs, so they actually require more expensive care.
Oh, wow. So they're dealing with a smaller but potentially way more expensive pool of Medicaid members. That's tricky. Are states adjusting how much they pay for Medicaid to account for this?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is not really UNH, and other insurers are caught in a bind. They have to provide care for this smaller group with higher needs, but without a corresponding increase in payments from states.
So Medicare Advantage cuts on one side, Medicaid rate mismatches on the other, both putting the squeeze on UNH's public insurance business? What else is on their radar?
Well, this is where it gets really real. And it's something that could directly hit everyone's wallets. We need to talk about specialty drug costs.
Specialty drugs. Those are the super expensive ones, right? I feel like I'm seeing more and more commercials for them these days.
You're not imagining it. And their prices, through the roof. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars per year sometimes. And they're being prescribed more and more for really complex conditions, cancer, autoimmune diseases, rare genetic disorders, you name it.
Okay, so specialty drugs are a growing cost for the entire healthcare system.
Got it.
But how is this a unique challenge for UNH?
They're getting hit harder than expected. The costs are rising much faster than they anticipated, especially in the second half of this year. It's putting a real dent in their financial projections.
Why is that? Increased demand for these drugs.
That's part of it. But the CEO pointed to a few other factors. Remember the Inflation Reduction Act? That actually seems to be having some unintended consequences when it comes to specialty drugs.
This is why I love these deep dives. We see how policy changes, even with the best intentions, can have these ripple effects throughout the system. So what's the link between the Inflation Reduction Act and these costs?
So one thing the IRA did was eliminate out-of-pocket costs for some medications once patients reach a certain amount of spending. It's called catastrophic coverage. Now, this is great for patients. It helps them avoid crazy medical debt. But it seems to be leading to some people hitting that catastrophic coverage threshold faster, which ends up costing insurers like UNH more.
It's a double-edged sword, helping patients afford their meds but potentially driving up costs for the system as a whole.
Exactly. It really highlights how complex healthcare policy is and how hard it is to predict all the consequences, both good and bad.
It makes you think, how do you even plan for these kinds of unknowns? It's like UNH is walking a tightrope, trying to manage these immediate challenges while also positioning themselves for a future that's still up in the air.
It's a balancing act for sure, and it's something we'll explore more in the next part of our deep dive. UNH clearly knows that things are changing fast, and they're making big moves to adapt. The question is, will it be enough to navigate all the uncertainty that's coming down the pike?
Okay, so we've got UNH posting these record profits, but at the same time, they're kind of waving their arms about some pretty big challenges ahead.
Yeah, it's a weird situation, right? And it makes their outlook for 2025 even more interesting, don't you think?
Because they're not expecting the same level of growth they've had in the past, is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
For 2025, they're projecting earnings around $30 per share.
Which, I mean, on the surface, that still sounds pretty good.
Right. But it's actually slower growth than they usually aim for. Their typical target is more like 16%. So they're basically saying, look, those headwinds we talked about, Medicare Advantage cuts, Medicaid rate mismatches, those crazy specialty drug costs, yeah, those are going to have an impact.
So does that mean they're hitting the brakes on their whole growth strategy?
Not necessarily. And this is what I think is smart about UNH's approach.
Yeah.
They're choosing to invest a lot of resources in areas they think are going to be huge for the future of healthcare, even if it means maybe giving up some short-term gains.
So they're playing the long game.
Got it.
What are some of the big areas they're putting their money on?
Well, we already touched on Optum and their big push into value-based care. That's a massive part of their strategy. They're banking on the idea that if they can create this comprehensive healthcare ecosystem where everything's connected, that's how they'll be able to improve outcomes, control costs, and basically be the leader in a healthcare world that's changing faster than ever.
Makes sense. And what about technology? I know we talked a bit about their use of AI earlier.
That's another huge piece of the puzzle. UNH is pouring money into using AI to streamline things, personalize care, basically make the whole healthcare experience smoother and more patient-centered. You know how Netflix recommends movies based on what you've watched? It's kind of like that. But for your health, imagine getting personalized health advice and interventions before you even realize you need them.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. It's like they're trying to predict and manage health needs before they even become a problem.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive, which is at the core of value-based care. They're betting that these upfront investments will pay off big time down the line as healthcare continues to evolve.
So looking ahead to 2025 and beyond, what are you most curious about? What are the trends you'll be watching closely?
Well, from UNH's perspective, a lot hinges on what happens with commercial insurance.
Huh.
Will businesses start demanding different types of plans to try and get their own healthcare costs under control? Will they be more open to these value-based models that UNH is putting so much faith in?
It's a good question, because right now it feels like everyone's getting squeezed. Individuals, businesses, insurers, everyone's feeling the pressure of rising healthcare costs.
It's a big problem. And it might be the push that finally gets people to take these alternative approaches like value-based care more seriously. Another thing to watch is how quickly technology is adopted across the entire healthcare system. Will we see a real shift towards a more data-driven, personalized approach? Or will it be slower than we expect?
And then, of course, there's the elephant in the room, the economy. Nobody can predict what's going to happen there.
You said it. And obviously, the economy impacts everything, healthcare spending included. But here's the thing. I think even with all the uncertainty, UNH is sending a clear message with their investments. Their focus is on a future of healthcare that's proactive, tech-driven, and built on that value-based care model. Whether they nail it or stumble along the way, their journey is going to be fascinating to watch.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. We go beyond just the headlines. We get into the nitty-gritty of what's actually shaping the future of healthcare for UNH. Oh, yeah, but also for all of us. All right, that's it for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another behind-the-scenes look at the forces shaping our world. Until then, stay curious.